in Mexico, the Aztec. He has entered the tournament, and he faces a tough test today also.
Well, he is going up against a man with...
His opponent for this event, from Harlem, New York, at 275 pounds, Bad News!
With what could be the worst disposition of anyone in the GWF. I've never seen this guy smile. I've never seen him even remotely happy. Got a permanent scowl on his face, but the thing about it is he can back it up.
All right, the Aztec taking on Bad News, and Bad News starting right off with an attitude. The referee says, let's ring the bell and get this match started. Bad News tries a sneak attack, but the Aztec catches on, stops it. Now the Aztec, I'm sure we're going to see some high-flying moves from the Aztec. As we said, he is a Mexican wrestler, and they are high flyers in Mexico.
They certainly are, in the lucha libre style. Almost everything from the top rope on down. Not a whole lot of laying on the mat and working on those points of balance we talked about earlier. All very high-flying, exciting maneuvers. Bad News not very well schooled in that type of wrestling, I wouldn't think.
Well, the Aztec trying to get Bad News into a test of strength here, and he keeps moving, changing his hands, and Bad News is going to go for it, it looks like. It's hard to tell in the outfit the Aztec is wearing just how strong he is, but this is one way we can sure find out.
Bad News, an active wrestler in Mexico in the super heavyweight division and the EMLL division.
Which makes us wonder if these two men maybe have run into each other before down in Mexico.
Quite possibly.
That's the kind of move we're talking about right there. That's one way out of that situation, and Bad News doesn't like it.
He heads for the apron to take a few minutes to catch his breath and to think exactly. You know, I would think, seeing how Bad News Brown reacted to that, maybe he hasn't run across the Aztec before. He would have been prepared for that type of maneuver. Maybe this is Bad News' first opportunity to get a look at the Aztec and that weird-looking outfit he's got. That's got to be a distraction for somebody like Bad News, who's just...
Whoa, look at that. Brought him down, had him in a wrist lock, brought him down, and now he's got him. Using those legs to stretch the arm of Bad News.
Bad News just in your classic wrestling tights and wrestling boots, and the Aztec has on, gosh, more clothes than I do. I think he's covered from head to toe.
Very futuristic looking, with a man with a name with a very historic past, the Aztec. Bad News Brown trying to come up now, trying to get back to his feet. He's back up on his feet, but the Aztec uses those legs and the balance to bring him right back down to the mat.
Well, Bad News, as we mentioned on an earlier edition of Major League Wrestling, once wrestled in Pakistan before a crowd of 100,000 people, wrestling against New Japan Wrestling legend Antonio Inoki. That's 100,000 people turned out to see those two men wrestle each other. Says a lot about what the fans in Pakistan think of the abilities of Bad News.
Right, he is a top star in Japan, and he's turning into one of the top stars here. And the Aztec gave that one away. He went down. Bad News grabbed the rope just enough to slow himself down, saw what was going on, and put a chop right to the back of the head of the Aztec. And now the Aztec looks like he might be in trouble here.
Well, not knowing who the Aztec is, we can't tell how much experience he has or anything about his background, so we're going to have to go with what we see, and we don't like that. He can't like it anyway.
Bad News Brown just moved right out of the way. The Aztec went flying over the top rope down onto the railing, and the Aztec, I think, is in trouble. Bad News is right down there with him. Bad News is not going to give him the opportunity to rest. He went down after him and said, here, let's get back in the ring.
Well, you can't pin the man on the floor and make it count. And for as mean as Bad News is, he does have one thing on his mind, and that's to win. Not very interested in being disqualified, just wants to brutalize, inflict pain, and then get the 3 count.
right now just choking on the Aztec. You know, as I look down, we've got some great matches coming up still on today's show. Jeff Gaylord will take on John Tatum in a first-round match, and I'm looking forward to that. And how about this one? The Handsome Stranger taking on Al Perez. All of that still to come on today's program. Right now, the Aztec getting the worst end of Bad News Brown. And, you know, I wonder, this is the Aztecs' first trip into the Global Wrestling Federation. I wonder if he was not prepared for something like this, Scott.
Well, you never can prepare for someone like Bad News, short of going down to the bad side of town and getting in a knife fight. I don't recommend that at all.
Well, the Aztec moved out of the way in that one. Bad News went face first into that turnbuckle, but still able to use that foot, which is, of course, one of his biggest weapons. Now the Aztec using an elbow. I think the Aztec ought to be using more of his high-flying moves, if you want to know the truth. I think the way to confound Bad News is to going to be keep him off his feet, and you go flying around him, buzzing around him like the fly. And the Aztec has not done that, which is what I would have expected of a Mexican-style wrestler.
Standing toe-to-toe with Bad News is not recommended, at least from my perspective, for anybody going in there against this man. You're going to have to do something a little bit different because Bad News has seen it all. Bronze medalist in the 1976 Olympics in judo.
Oh, look at that.
He's seen it from all sides.
As a matter of fact, NBC has recently done a feature on Bad News to be featured in the upcoming Olympics. They're going back and seeing what has happened to a lot of the former Olympians. Look at that. Bad News was going to dive on top of the Aztec. The Aztec brought his knees up, and Bad News came right down on top of the knees of the Aztec, knocking the wind out of him. This may be the very thing the Aztec has needed to get this match turned around.
Well, the Aztec now has the upper hand, and he better, as they say, strike while the iron is hot.
Take advantage of this opportunity. You're not going to get it too often. Drop kick. He's got Bad News Brown down. He should be over on top of him. Instead, he's talking to the ring, talking to the people around the ring. He really ought to be there trying to take advantage of the situation.
And Aztec looks a little bit tired in there. When you wear that type of outfit, your body can't breathe. You can't sweat like you normally would. Your body can't cool itself with a natural cooling system, so he may be tiring himself out a little bit earlier than normal just by wearing that get-up in there that he has on.
Well, Bad News Brown throws into the corner again. He goes up for that monkey flip again, but this time, Bad News held on to that turnbuckle. The Aztec landed right on the back of his head. That's the setup move for that. The ghetto blaster, and the Aztec is down. I do not think he will get up.